Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your Jack Kemp Foundation President, Jimmy Kemp.
This third session is focused on expanding work and ownership. One of the things that we heard in our community meetings over the past 6 months is that there have to be job opportunities. We know that human flourishing happens when people have the opportunity to earn their own success. And it's great to see young people like the dancers, the chess players, the young scientists. They're earning their own success. They're realizing what they can learn, what they can achieve. And so this panel is going to talk about work and ownership, and the ownership, that session with Mays Jackson and Bob Woodson and Congressman Davis and Dave Doig, talking about those things is so important. And this panel is going to talk about how to encourage work and ownership the way it is happening in the policy world, and what needs to still happen. So to moderate this session, we're really fortunate to have Congressman Bob Dold from here in Chicago, a great guy. He represented, I can't remember which district it is. 10th, thank you, 10th district. And I remember hearing about Bob Dold and saying, huh, Senator Dold, he's not. No, this is Bob Dold, and I'm happy to bring him out. Welcome, Congressman Bob Dold. Thanks, Bob. So, Bob, I've got to ask you what I've asked every other moderator. You need to share introduce yourself with the passion that you have in your life. What makes your heart beat fast? What gets you excited and going? What makes your heart go?
I think it gets me going is service, but I mean, that's kind of the political answer. It's really my kids, right? It's families, and it's about...
how many kids do you have?
I have 3 kids. I have 2 girls and a boy, and a wife who is absolutely a saint. Fantastic. But, I mean, that's what I think kind of drives communities is family, and that's kind of what we're here about, is about how do we make sure that these communities are stronger? How do they have opportunity? How do we make sure that they've got a roof over their head and a job to go to?
Yep, great.
Hey,
thanks.
Thanks so much.
Bring them out.
So I am pleased to be here today. We've got a great panel for you. And again, this panel, I think, is we're going to put some questions to them. We've got the Chicago Alderman Gilbert Villegas. We've got Courtney Jones, who is the president of the Dearborn Realtist Board. And we've got Steve Preston, who's the former HUD secretary, all joining us today. So guys, I don't know where, there you are. Please welcome me in joining my panel. So, yeah, it was interesting when Jimmy kind of introduced us as Bob Dold. You know, I used to work for Bob Dold, too, which was great fun. So I used to travel around ahead doing some advance work for Senator Dole and for Secretary Kemp at the time, and who was running for vice president. And always there was great confusion. But so welcome to the panel as we talk about opportunity. And Alderman, I wanted to start with you as we look at the city of Chicago and specifically this area, which, again, huge opportunities. As the head and the chair of the Latino caucus, tell me about what is the things that are most exciting for you, things that you're working on right here in order to expand opportunity for the community.
Well, thank you, Congressman. Some of the things that we're working on right now relates to the mega project that's going to be occurring at O'Hare. It's an $8.5 billion project, and what we're trying to accomplish there, prior to voting on the ordinance that allowed for that lease agreement to move forward, I teamed up with the Black Caucus to kind of make sure that we had some type of oversight committee in place, so that way on a quarterly basis we would find out where are some of the shortfalls, what opportunities are coming, so that way we can prepare our communities to participate on these types of projects, because they don't come around very often. And so as a result of our collaboration, we were able to move forward a ordinance that created this oversight committee. And as I mentioned, we'll be meeting on a quarterly basis to determine what are some of the opportunities for the community.
And just so that the folks know, this is not something that's happened before in the past, where you get the 2 different caucuses together. Am I correct in saying that?
No. So if you can imagine, you have 50 aldermen, all type A personalities, and so trying to herd cats. And so one of the things that I've quickly found out that both caucuses, and really my caucus specifically, can agree on were jobs and contracts. And so as a result, we said, hey, there's a $8.5 billion infrastructure project that's moving forward. This is something that I think we can collaborate on. And as a result, in speaking with the chairman of the Black Caucus, we move forward with some legislation to put that oversight committee in place.
How many jobs do you anticipate in something along these lines it would be success?
So $8.5 billion over a 10-year period, you're talking upwards over 50,000 jobs.
And I know in talking with Mr. Hicks earlier, who's right down here in front, talking about not only education, but talking about jobs. Courtney, housing is obviously a key component of this whole thing. Your background, and I'd like you to kind of just tell us a little bit more, because I'm not sure people know exactly what the board is that you're president of, but also your background not only in banking but in real estate. There is an enormous disparity between racial disparity in terms of home ownership, especially here in the Chicagoland area, but around the country. Can you talk about kind of why that's the case and kind of what we can be looking at to try to rectify some of those things?
Yes, definitely. Well, let me first start with the National Association of Real Estate Brokers is the African American Real Estate Trade Association. The Dearborn Realtors Board that I'm blessed to be the current board president of is here in Illinois. And we've done a huge study around the state of housing in Black America. And what that study has shown is the housing ratios, if you will, is about a 38% of Black home ownership rate versus a 72% non-Black and Latino home ownership rate across this country. And when we kind of look at this being the year of the 50th anniversary of fair housing, you know, the numbers are still rather similar to when they were 50 years ago. So even though we have more homeowners now, the home ownership rate still hasn't been able to reach great lengths as of yet. And as we dig into it, there's several components as coming out of the implosion of the housing market. You know, we know that restrictive access to credit has been a big hindrance. So as we continue to dig and push forward that mission of housing counseling and financial literacy, it's also really the lobby effort in getting, you know, that support in Washington around alternative means of credit scoring models, taking things into consideration like rental payments, utility, and taking it into account in a way where the automatic assessment models that a lot of the lenders use to assess credit scoring takes that into consideration, so on the front end, more Black families can get approved.
So really what you're talking about is trying to provide credit for the credit invisible, or those that are not. Right now, Steve, you know probably better than most, as being the former Secretary of the Housing and Urban Development, you know, the Fannie, Freddie, and some of those big guys in terms of creating credit scores are really only factoring in the, you know, 4 factors or so in the FICO score, or very few. How would we expand that to address issues that Courtney's talking about, to kind of expand that ability for people that might not have typical credit to be able to buy that first home, or at least be able to get access to credit?
Right. Well, first let me make a little bit of a historical point. I've got to move up. My feet aren't touching the ground on this chair. One of the misconceptions of the housing crisis was that a lot of people sort of at the low end of the economic scale were a problem. What we found is very different. People getting starter homes, people who were what we would call lower middle class but had a mortgage, were not the people who weren't paying their bills. Okay? They were people who went from a $400,000 home to an $800,000 home with a loan that they couldn't afford because it was, you know, delayed interest, balloons at the end, or whatever. And so it's really important to completely dispel this misconception that people at a particular place in the economic spectrum can't afford a home. It's getting them in the right home with the right loan. And you're absolutely right. A lot of the credit scoring was done based on very simplistic models. I think in a world that's constantly striving for efficiency and throughput, that's what we've seen. I think what we need to do, and certainly where we are, as an industry, with the amount of data we have, with the amount of analytics we have, with a better understanding of the different groups that we're lending to put together much more sophisticated scoring models that really do take into account ability to pay, propensity to pay, and a number of other things. It's not a one-size-fits-all business. And it's also really important to take away the false narratives around who pay and who doesn't pay.
Steve, I want to come back to you again. Coming from the perspective, obviously, former Secretary Jack Kemp believed homeownership was critical. Having sat in that role, understanding where we've come from the subprime, meltdown that happened to today, what would you advise the current administration about programs that you think are really working well, what we can be doing better? Because oftentimes getting rid of programs doesn't work, when really what we want to do is find out the programs that are working, invest more heavily in those types of programs. What would you recommend to the current administration about things that they should be looking to do?
Right, so when these things happen, we get sort of a throw the baby out with the bathwater mentality a lot of times. When I was, many of you may not realize, FHA is part of HUD, right? FHA in Veterans Administration, a couple of other programs, I think are terrific vehicles to help people at the front end of getting their first home, maybe that don't have quite as much equity as some of the market desires, to get in there and to be able to afford it. So I'm actually an advocate for a group of people to be able to get that kind of support, right? And the federal government, historically, those loans have been administered with virtually no cost to the taxpayer, because the federal government can get that money cheaply and they don't look to make a profit. The other thing I would emphasize was what your point was just a minute ago, is we really have to have financial literacy in mortgage counseling programs that reach out much more fully. This is something, when I was leading the Small Business Administration, we worked very hard to do. Later at HUD, we expanded it dramatically. And it's also important at the front end of the lending process to ensure that when people are coming in for that loan, that they understand what they're getting into. When you look at the mortgage crisis, the documentation requirements at the front end didn't require really much understanding. That's why we pushed very hard for RESPA reform. There wasn't really an ethos among the mortgage generators to sit down with people and really help them understand what they were getting into, what their accountabilities were, and whether they could afford it. And I really think when you think about just fundamental business ethics, it doesn't all have to be driven by the government, right? You have to have people in those jobs who are looking at those clients, who care about the people that they're serving, and are accountable to say, this is the decision you're making, this is how it's gonna work, and make sure that people have the tools and the ability to make those good decisions. And it has to be on both sides of the table.
We've got one fan out there. Well done. Alderman, understanding government programs from a federal perspective, from a state and local perspective, obviously you're talking to people each and every day, part of your constituents, business owners and the like. What are they saying when you're saying we need to get more people back to work, we need to make sure that they're educated? What are their frustrations, and therefore what are your frustrations in terms of getting more people into this opportunity to get a job and potentially even start a home?
Right, and so one of the things, I've taken a different approach where I have 14 schools in my ward, but I'm really focusing on 2 of them. One's a college prep and the other one's a vocational school. And I know that the big push for the past decade has been that we want our kids to go to college. And so kids are thinking they're failing if they're not going to college, but the reality is that in the vocational school, in the skills, there's huge opportunities there. And so as a result, what I've done with my vocational school is team up with People's Gas, with some of the building trades, because you're talking about careers, not jobs, but careers that could ultimately that will ultimately make more than college graduates, but also have the opportunity to lead to entrepreneurs. Actually, these folks with skilled trades actually becoming business owners. And as we're pushing for more diversity and parity within the contracting pool, there needs to be more minority and women exposed to the building trades, so that way those opportunities that are there, they can take advantage of them. Right now, at one of the schools that I'm working with, the vocational schools, we're probably about a year out before the program goes live, but the opportunities there and the exposure of the construction industry to these young men and women would ultimately lead to them making a career, but also selfishly having folks that have the ability to purchase homes within my ward, and they're not having to graduate from high school and then immediately go into a low-paying job, or they go into the military or go to college, and they're not prepared for college. So these types of exposure of these skilled trades to these kids at vocational schools, I think, is what's going to have the ability to have them sustain in trying to purchase a home and maintain that home.
Have you seen any schools, any examples of them being able to do that well?
Yeah. So right now on the south side, there's a school called Dunbar, and they have, I think it's like its first or second year in existence, and so they're starting to put these programs in place, but I haven't seen the graduates yet. But in the meantime, what I've told the mayor is that the school on Dunbar is on 35th and King Drive, and I said we need to have something similar on our northwest side, especially as we're talking about this $8.5 billion O'Hare project. Having some of the schools that are in the proximity to that big opportunity there, we want to make sure that we have these young men and women prepared for that.
Courtney, I don't know if you know, St. Martin de Porres is a school that basically puts a job model in place, meaning that the students, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, all actually job share. And the company actually hires them in theory, and that defrays costs of the school. The advantage that they have is that they all of a sudden know what it's like to show up for work, have some responsibilities, and I believe have a huge leg up over other students because they've been in essence, corporate America, or at least in a job, and therefore have a leg up on summer jobs, and then therefore leg up on jobs coming as they get out of school. Have you seen in your experience where you're looking at those folks that are coming out of the workforce or out of school that are either ill-prepared or better prepared, and what is the difference between the two?
Yes, actually, just piggybacking off of what the alderman just shared, and seeing the trades not in the schools, right? In an ideal world, it would be great for everybody to go to college. Right, but what we're seeing, especially relative to the housing industry and how it relates to neighborhoods and holistic, sustainable neighborhoods, the more we have an infrastructure of our youth having access to careers and ownership through career. So the contracting piece, the masonry, the HVAC, being able to own their own businesses relative to college, is incredible. So when we're having internships, when we have our financial literacy outreaches, and we're working with our faith-based leadership, all the different pastors and reverends of the different mosques and Christian faiths and others, as you engage folks and you start talking to them, you see that they have a passion to acquire this knowledge. It's really on the leadership and all of us to make sure we provide them the tools to get to ownership, as opposed to just working.
So let me ask you all the same a question. We talked about financial literacy, how important it is for those to come out to be able to put themselves on the right path. Who should be the one that's in charge of doing it, or who should we try to task? Because you can't have just the federal government say financial literacy is a good thing and we want people to do it. Should this, obviously we'd like it done at schools, but who else? What other organizations should we be tasking? Because this is going to be one that I think a lot of people have to deal with, and yet it doesn't happen.
Go ahead.
You know what? I'm about to jump on my jacket, so forgive me. Being in a real estate trade association, for us and pushing our 2 million and 5, our 2 million black homeowner initiative over the next 5 years, this is a key cornerstone for us. So we're starting with the focus of messaging from the top down. So we're looking at from the government support piece, pushing a message around home ownership is important, and we know coming out of the implosion that folks have this mindset that renting is safe and it's okay. So we want to continue pushing a message of encouraging home ownership. Then when we get into the financial literacy piece, you have several entities like NID Housing Counseling, you know, the NAACP, Urban, like there's tons that do it. So what we're coaching is in every ward that it's critical for us to come together. Like we're even doing May 26th, we have our Wealth Building Day at Malcolm X, 10 to 4, bringing all of the different housing experts together to interface with the community, where we'll be going over the ABCs of purchasing. We'll be going over development, but with 6th to 12th graders, as well as our millennials and adults. Because we can't leave our 6th to 12th graders out. They haven't had damage credit. They don't have the different negative fears associated with owner. So if we get to them early now, they'll have the courage along with the working knowledge. Then we're gonna have a help desk for attorneys. So we have the struggle in Illinois around the property tax issue and loan modification struggles. We're telling folks come there. So without belaboring the question, I think it's a multi-layer, multifaceted approach of touching people at many different levels, whether it's school, whether it's the faith-based, whether it's our aldermanic and our governmental support, and as well as our GSEs with that messaging of encouraging home ownership, rewarding our lenders to say, is your purchaser housing counseled? Have they been through some form of financial literacy training before they purchase? And that just encourages folks to be more knowledgeable, and I think that speaks to what our former secretary, what he just mentioned.
Yeah, so I think it's important as a starting point to acknowledge that people who are not financially literate, whether they're kids or people trying to start a new business or whatever, enter a situation with a certain amount of blindness, right? And there are all these issues that they're facing that they just won't understand. And when you give them that literacy, it's like the world opens up to them. Things make sense in a completely different way. So I believe that every high school should be teaching their kids to be financially literate. I don't think any child should graduate high school in this country without a foundational level of financial literacy. You know what? And they're there all day anyway, right? We got them.
Generally, we hope
right,
they're there.
You hope they are. But then, there are certain access points, or there are certain decision points that people make where financial literacy is particularly critical. And we have to make sure that it is in place in those decision points. So one is mortgages, right? We were just talking about that. The other thing is I ran the Small Business Administration for a couple of years. And there is such enormous power in entrepreneurship in our country. We launched, when I was at SBA, we launched a program for almost nothing to bring support to inner city entrepreneurs who had an opportunity to form businesses, create jobs, bring capital to the city. We launched it in 10 cities. When the Obama administration came in, they expanded it. It's now in 60 cities. 80% of those businesses have grown, have added jobs, and what do? We brought them a higher level of financial literacy, a higher level of awareness on how to build businesses and how to build networks. But what we found in that process, in a foundation for that, was the fact that it wasn't, we were the federal government, but all we were doing is really bringing convening authority, and we were bringing some basic teaching programs. What we ended up doing is tapping into the local economic development office, tapping into the local technical assistance providers, tapping into the local banking network who would come. And what we realized is we really had the ability just to bring in all these resources that were already there. And they're out there, but we have to figure out how to bring those to the decision points, to the points where people need that development to get to that next stage, whether it's starting a business, getting out of school, getting a mortgage, because those are the places where they need the skills and they're most relevant.
Yeah, I would say that I agree with the secretary that starting in high school, at least exposing them to that, I think it's very important. At the very local level with the alderman, as the alderman, we're the first line of defense for everything, so everyone comes to us for every issue. I even had one constituent tell me, you need to tell Trump. And I was like, well, you know, I'm an alderman, so I don't have his number.
You don't have his number?
I don't have his number.
You don't have his number, okay.
His chief of staff can't even tell them stuff.
Exactly.
I'm not sure that you can.
So they come to us for everything. And so in that vein, I work with some of the local partners, because sometimes government just needs to get out the way. And if there's someone who's doing it already, a not-for-profit that's doing it, I usually send people to that organization so that way they can learn about financial literacy. And I've also held some financial literacy classes in my office, focusing on single women, veterans, et cetera.
We've talked a bunch today about housing, how to get to ownership, financial literacy, but we're really putting the cart before the horse if we're not talking a little bit about work, right? If they don't have a job, the chances of them being able to get a house are you know, few and far between, not realistic. What are we doing in terms of work and jobs, and specifically as we look at either the number of high school dropouts that are out there, how do we kind of diminish that? Because if we look at just Chicago public schools and the number of folks that are dropping out of high school, what happens to them 5 years, 10 years down the road? And that's something that, again, for success, we need to have more people graduating from high school with those skills that you both, all three of you have talked about in terms of making sure that they've got real world skills. But how are we encouraging work? And Courtney, you and I talked the other day about recidivism and those that might have been incarcerated. How are we giving them at least a shot? In Illinois, we've done ban the box, but how are we giving those that might have been incarcerated a shot at coming out and getting a second chance?
Congressman Danny Davis spoke a little bit earlier, but one of the initiatives that he was a key driver of, and we've been pounding this, is licensure for all. So when you talk about workforce, one of the biggest things, in our licensure president, Craig Allison, is partnering with us at the Dearborn Realtors Board on May 26th to come out. When you have a background, okay, you apply for certain licensure, where you get a letter generated that if you're not an attorney, most folks couldn't even really understand the language. So what we are really coaching to is having folks come out, having the experts speak to what are the steps that if you have a background and you get that letter. It's not a denial. It's a process to where you have to go to the hearing, participate in the hearing, do some explanation. But those that attend the hearing, it's like an 88% that they get the license. So that allows us in the black community, to be specific for a second, to have more folks not become more repeat offenders. Because now you're out, you might have had a blemish issue, could have been a DUI, could have been anything. But now you're at a position to where now that's not a hindrance to having a career. So that speaks to one aspect of workforce. The next piece is even with the affordable housing development component. When you have a lot of the different blighted and distressed properties in the Chicagoland area, well, we just finished partnering and delivering a receivership forfeiture training program where we're trying to empower those in the community to actually take on those properties. We have smaller folks who could now become scalable, where they can hire more people to be a part of the securitizing of a property, the boarding up, the landscaping, HVAC, you name it, answering to what our housing court leadership, like our Judge Lennon Murray and others who are trying to see these properties get back in the community, but having the community be the ones to work on those projects. So it's a few different touch points around not allowing our folks that have blemishes on their background feel like it's a dead-end situation and there is no hope to be able to be gainfully employed. And then as well as having more of an opportunity for folks in the community to work on projects that would normally not even go to them in the community.
You know, this is you know, one of these issues that I think for a lot of us just breaks our heart, right? And there are all sorts of organizations in the city doing terrific work here, right? And if you look at, Dave Doig was up here a little earlier, what he didn't mention is he's got a lot of people who've come out of the penal system to do a lot of the redevelopment work that he does. And he works with Arnie Duncan and his people at Emerson to get some of them. We have a wonderful organization downtown called CARA that works with people, not just out of the penal system, but other people who've sort of fallen on hard times and are trying to get back into the workforce and really need a process of helping them through their issues a little bit and teach them how to go on an interview because, people get to these places because they've had challenges and you need to work with them to help them get back. But they get them back into the mainstream society. It's not saying we're going to take 20 of you guys and just do this. We're going to bring you back into the mainstream society. These people at CARA, this is just one microcosm, after they place people in work, have an 80% retention rate after a year in their jobs, mostly in the service industry. Now, I've run service businesses for a big part of my life, and the churn in those businesses is very high. These people, once they're trained, once they get that first job, they are committed because they're so thankful, right? And the state of Illinois is doing an entrepreneurship initiative with Sunshine Enterprises in the city where they're taking a number of people who are coming out of incarceration and teaching them how to be small business owners. So there are all sorts of different programs that wade into people's lives in ways that help them get to that next point that, in a way that's relevant to their need. The issue is, the problem is huge. We have thousands of people coming out of the penal system every year. And this is, I feel, this is really one of the areas in terms of just all of our ability to wade into a need that is just a massive unmet need. A massive unmet need that we don't have enough resources, we don't have enough support going into. And as a result, because of the recidivism rate, often I believe it happens because people don't get those job opportunities, we end up just perpetuating a problem that's much worse down the road. So I think this is an area that all of us should care deeply about in all of our endeavors in the not-for-profit world or in the political, on the governmental side. Try to be as creative and forceful as possible in helping those people get their lives back.
We've got just a couple of minutes left, and we've got a fantastic group of leaders throughout our community right here. Again, one of the problems I see out there is there's so many people who are doing great work and don't know what the person next to them is doing. Don't know that there is somebody right next door that's helping that could, if you teamed up together, could really make a bridge to really make a huge difference. What would your recommendation be to the group out here who is here because we care not only about the community, we care about kind of the lives that are being impacted? What would your one word of advice or one thing that you'd like to make sure they take away today?
Yeah, so a lot of times when you have not-for-profits competing for limited funds, it's important that the leaders of these not-for-profits know who are some of the other leaders that are working in that same space, and find out ways to collaborate, maybe do some joint ventures of some sort. But definitely they've got to get out there and network and talk with their elected officials that are ultimately going to be the ones to help fund some of these programs, so that way sometimes they may not know what services are being provided by other providers, but definitely the local and the state elected officials will know because ultimately they're coming to them for some assistance for funding.
Alderman Villegas, you getting your number out to everybody so they can call you?
Absolutely.
All right.
Very along the same line, what I personally strongly believe in is partnership and collaboration. You're so much stronger when you're working with folks. So in the business model, most of us are aware of our competition, right? So if we were to kind of change that mindset from competition to partners and really start building our databases based on who and what are complementary industries to what we do. So when you look at real estate and you look at things like food deserts, you look at things like schools, all of these different partners that help in different segments could become a pod to where now when we're doing different activities, you can leverage each other's strengths as we try to create a self-sustaining community.
I think our business communities have to care about this. I really do. I think when you look at job creation, when you think of funding opportunity, every big company has foundations. This is easy to make it somebody else's problem, but we need and one of your earlier, I think Dave Dillon mentioned this before, we need to have people in the business community who care enough to reach out, to invest in building facilities in places where we need them, to invest in job growth in places where we need it, to take a risk in hiring people who are trying to get their lives back. And the business community has not only massive financial resources, but they make decisions with them every day, and they can choose where to put their capital. They can choose how to hire people. And that is really what drives our economic structure, right? And to make a commitment that we're going to bring in 30 people this year who have come out of the penal system and work with our HR department to bring them back, to bring them into this company and make them, and help train them in a way to help them get their lives back. Or we have a manufacturing facility, we are going to make a decision to put it in this particular neighborhood to bring economic development and bring jobs. We have to have people make, in the business community, take a step forward, make those decisions, and be the examples for the rest of the business community. Because I do believe that if a few more businesses were doing this, you'd see a lot more of a tipping point here.
I don't disagree with you, but some of those businesses, especially the smaller entrepreneurs and the like, don't have the resources to necessarily make that happen. One of the things that I was working with local community colleges and actually some of the high schools was those businesses would come in to say, these are the types of folks that I'm looking for. Can you please help me train them? Can you put this type of a program together, whether it be local community college, that type of a thing. And they were very receptive as to being able to try to do that, and therefore created a pipeline. And that pipeline, again, what were they looking for? They were looking for people that would be able to show up, that would be able to be there consistently, have like a general C+ type average, but then they would be able to put them in these programs, and then they would create that feeder pipeline, which again I think is important. The other big concern that I heard from a number of employers, and I'm wondering if you were hearing the same, is one of the biggest things that keep them up at night is, how do I find good people? And they would constantly be getting people that they would have to train, retrain, because everybody has their own business processes. And just interested in your thought. There's a lot of training programs that are out there. One of the ideas that I tried to advance was accelerating individuals into the workforce, which would in essence give the power to the job seeker to say, I've got something, a voucher of sorts, that would enable and give it to the business owner so that it would defray costs to actually train them in the job that they've got available for them. They had to keep them on there for a period of time, because the statistics are, if they're there for a year, chances are they're going to stay, and they're going to be going there. Are you hearing some of the same things?
You're seeing that right now with city colleges. They have different college campuses that are focusing on certain things. So, for example, Malcolm X College, they're focusing on the medical field, Olive Harvey, transportation, out at Wright College, cybersecurity, et cetera. So they've kind of broken it down like that, and they've got corporate partners that are help funding some of the programs that are available at city colleges. And so I'm taking that same approach at the high school level, especially with the vocational school, teaming them up with People's Gas, ComEd, saying, hey, there's going to be a shortage of workers that are available because we've had this big pushing people to college, but never into the trades. And so there's just a huge shortage. And we're talking about the building trades. We haven't even spoken about the railroad industry, aviation industry. So there's just a huge void that's going to happen. And so we need to start preparing those kids for that. So city colleges is taking that approach. I'm taking that approach at the local schools in my area as well.
Great. On our end, there's two parts. One, and doing a lot of partnerships with lenders, banks, trying to really have good representation out. One of the things that we've gotten feedback from was what you just touched on, some of the challenges in trying to hire folks. So we definitely stress the point of getting those job postings, leveraging through the different trade associations. What are the transferable skills from other jobs that folks may have been laid off from? and how they could be leveraged in a new opportunity. I think that's pretty large. And then on the youth side, leveraging high school students that may have work permits and getting them an internship format where they can get exposed to the different careers that are next generation, visionary, futurists, as we're all learning now, and getting them kind of engaged with that activity now so that as they get into the colleges or in the workforce already, they're prepared.
Steve, you got the last word.
Yeah, I agree, and I do think when you think about these things, there is a process between who's the person I need and what's the person in the intake point, right? And there are all sorts of job training skills or specialty skills or trade skills that are required to get from point A to point B. And we've seen a lot of companies do partnerships with local colleges. We've seen a lot of companies invest in fairly rich training programs. And I just think it's important to understand that ultimately, you know, if you're trying to bring somebody back and you're trying to give them an opportunity, you need to be able to invest in that person to get them to that point where they can do that job effectively. And what's not helpful is when somebody's at a point in their life, especially, you know, when you're talking about some of the challenges we have here, when they're at a point in their life where they don't have the skills or have had other types of challenges in their lives, you need to invest enough in that person to get them to the point where they can be successful and not step into another failure. And it gets back to the point of saying, excuse me, you know, where has this person come from? Who's the person I need to employ, and how do I help them get there? And there are a lot of ways to do that, but we have to be sort of honest and respectful of the challenge, and then lean into the challenge to meet it.
Alderman Gilbert Villegas, Courtney Jones, Steve Preston, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Well, as you can tell, there is so much that goes into putting on an event like this. And I was just talking to my brother, Jeff, who played in the NFL for 11 years and worked in a nonprofit, started a nonprofit up in Seattle. He wrote a book called Facing the Blitz. You can understand the football analogy. But what strikes me about this event, not only what you see, but behind the scenes, is what I've learned about the Chicago Cubs and the way they ended up winning the World Series in 2016. Todd Ricketts told me the story of how they had to transform the culture, and they had to treat everybody with the value that they deserved, and they had to hold people accountable. And so you had players who were critical, but who had to have the culture transformed. They had to be held accountable. You had the manager, you had the coaches, the marketing team, the training staff, the doctors, the folks who do the books in the accounting office. Sports is so great because it teaches us how teamwork happens. And today, I obviously want to start by thanking the Ricketts for bringing this event here to Chicago, for bringing a Major League World Series championship back to Chicago. But the teamwork that they've taught, I think, has been on display here. And what we've heard is all the components of a team. Everybody has a role to play. And I hope what you are taking away from this day is the role that you have to play, where you can encourage somebody, where you can take action. And if we do our job, then the team is all pulling in the same direction. And it's one of the things that Jeff said is, Jimmy, just emphasize the incredible teamwork that is on display here. And so I want to take a moment to thank the team that is, before the event is over and lots of people have left, we still have a lot of good things left, and we're about to do our lightning talks. But I want to thank Kristen Jackson, who the Ricketts had spent so much time on this. Kristen has been a great partner for me. And then at the Jack Kemp Foundation, many of the team members who you have met, Hannah Wardell, who came to Chicago one time with me a few months ago, Emma Watkins, Gretchen Moss. I want to thank the CSI events team who put this all on CSI found the Garrity for us, and we think it was a really appropriate spot for us to come and have these discussions. I do want to thank the board of the Jack Kemp Foundation for the critical role that they play. We have a new member, Merritt Thomas, who's sitting over here, Ron Slimp, who's sitting in back, Jeff Kemp, who's here. We don't have Caesar Conda. My mom, Joanne Kemp, who's the the chairwoman emeritus of the Jack Kemp Foundation, and my sister, Jennifer, who can sit in and say whatever she wants. You know what she did? My sister, she's awesome, but she loves to needle me. And I bought these shoes that were distressed, and I don't know, I'm not really good at shopping, but I bought these what I thought were cool shoes, and they're distressed. She took an up-close picture of them from her seat. She sent it to all my siblings and said, Jimmy, where on earth did you get those? So it's good to have a family team who keeps you humble, and but I hope you have the feeling of family, of teamwork, and what we're going to do now is bring out the reverend of our team, the team chaplain for the Chicago Cubs before they won a World Series, but we know he contributed to it. And Alvin Bibbs is going to bring these lightning talks to us, and he's going to keep these leaders in check, making sure that they stay by their time, but that they get right to the point. Please welcome Alvin Bibbs.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Come on, turn it up, turn it up. All right, I know it's been just a fantastic day, and I am honored. I have one of the more diversified group of panelists up here that's going to be joining me, and I want you to give them a nice round of applause when they come up here on the stage this afternoon. All right, put your hands together. All right, coming up to the stage, we have Chicago Alderman Ricardo Munoz. We also have Jonathan Kumar, founder of Samaritan. Chicago Alderman Willie Cochran. Jeff Kramer, Real Food America. Chicago Alderman Scott Waguespack. Give some love, guys. Okay, we're delighted. Why don't you go ahead and have a seat? Thanks for joining us here this afternoon.
Thank you.
And this really is a lightning round, so we're going to light up the place this afternoon and have some fun at the same time, but cover some very important topics along the way. Okay? Yep. So Scott, why don't we start with you?
All right.
Okay? The question would be, what should our people here this afternoon know about you personally?
Well, I've been a Chicago Alderman for about a little over a decade, and in that time, what I've looked at trying to do is not only work on my ward, 32nd Ward, which is the near north side of Chicago. It's close to Wrigleyville, but not close enough. And what I've been trying to do in my ward is something that I want to share with the other aldermen, make sure that we're having successes in our area of the city with small businesses and the residents, our schools, our accountability from top to bottom, and spread that throughout the city. That's something that I feel is important not only to do in my ward, but at the full city council. So when I look at my colleagues here, Alderman Cochran, Alderman Munoz, it's something that I know on a daily basis I'm trying to do across the city so that everyone has successes, everyone is uplifted in the city, and that we're not just focused on one small portion of the city, both in my mind and in the work that I do.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Jonathan, what about you? What should our friends here know about you?
Gosh, this one's easy.
Okay.
Homelessness is one of the biggest issues of our time. Our cities are spending billions of dollars a year trying to combat it, and they, or I should say we, are losing.
Yes.
Unable often to even measure the results. I mean, out of the audience, like, think back to the last time you saw someone experiencing homelessness and the thoughts that went through your mind. Gosh, is this person truly in need? Do I even have cash on me to give? Do I have the time to stop and engage? If I have cash, is that truly the best way to help this individual? I mean, show of hands, how many of you in the last week have experienced this at least once? It's sadly the majority. In the last 2.5 years in downtown Seattle, I've stumbled on to, I think, the greatest intervention to homelessness ever discovered.
Okay.
You guys. What I do is I provide small necklaces called beacons to people experiencing homelessness in downtown Seattle. Basically, if someone has this beacon and you have this Samaritan app on your phone, just by passing by a beacon holder, driving by, walking by, biking by, you'll get a notification on your phone that pops up and says, hey, you know, this is this person's story. You can learn how they got to the streets, and you can give money towards groceries, warm clothing, bus fare, haircuts, and more. Once a month, the beacon holder sits down with a counselor and a navigator at a nonprofit. So I've seen this combination of financial resources and relational guidance result in housing, employment, and unprecedented data.
Great.
Several beacon holders have left the street in Seattle now, and each of those people save our city $40,000 per person per year and makes our city a better place to live. So my goal now is eventually to partner with nonprofits and funders in local to different communities so that they can essentially take our technology and apply it to their own context. So if any of you guys are interested in making that happen here in Chicago, where I actually had the idea, be happy to talk to you afterwards.
Thanks, Jonathan. Appreciate that. Chicago Alderman Willie Cochran. What should our friends know about you? Southside Chicago.
Well, I'm glad to be here today, first of all. And I want to thank the Kemp Foundation for coming in, doing the work that they're doing to host this event. Secondly, they should know that many of the issues that you've talked about today have been addressed, as far as my experience has been, through quality of life planning in Chicago. I've had the opportunity to lead programs in the Woodlawn community, Washington Park, Inglewood, back of the arts. And what is that? Quality of life planning. That it is looking at a community from a comprehensive approach, engaging the community at that level, getting their input on what they want their community to look like, and implementing and showing successes in each one of those. And what are those things that we have successes in? That's housing, economic development, schools, safety, parks, education, both primary and secondary, trades, retail, and neighborhood development. Through that process, the communities that I've served not only has had that back over the last 15 years, that's when we started, we've gone into and the planning process is planned for a 5-year window. And after that 5-year window, you go back and you review and you revise, because time passes, economics change, and other matters come up where the community needs to come back to the table and revisit the plan that has been in place. I've been fortunate enough to sit in the Woodlawn community where we've been able to get a grant from the federal government of $30 million. And that grant has been leveraged to $400 million because of the partnerships that went into a program to make that community and make it a promise community. A promise community is a program that the President Barack Obama, offered to communities around the country. And we had to compete for that $30 million. And we had to show how we were going to leverage that $30 million and get to the end that we wanted to get to. We were fortunate enough to be one of 8 cities to get that, 8 communities to get it, and Woodlawn was one of those communities. As a result, we've had the quality of life planning program in the Woodlawn, Washington Park, Inglewood's communities that has given us directions. After that, we revise. and we initiate, and we get support from the MacArthur Foundation and others that have given us resources to make these things possible. Why? Because there had to be a model, and then we follow up with the $30 million grant for Promise Community. That Promise Community is a vision that the president had that says if you put a focus on an area and you put the resources in that area and the support systems and mechanisms in that area, the outcomes that you are seeking and needing in your community will be achieved. And I am glad to be at a place where I have been a lead in that process.
All right, appreciate that. Thank you, Alderman. Okay, Jeff, what about you? What should our friends know about you and Real Food America in 2 minutes or less?
Sure. We've all heard the phrase, we are what we eat, and I've kind of taken that to heart. I've spent close to 4 decades doing government affairs work in Washington, D.C., but the last 20 I've spent working closely with the senior and disability community, and I've started to recognize some of the issues that they faced as far as food went and healthy food. And so I recently started 501c3, Real Food America, and our first project is called Real Food Pantry. And what Real Food Pantry is a demonstration training kitchen that's going to take place in assisted housing, in government-assisted housing. It was mentioned earlier, Secretary Carson's Envision Center initiative at HUD, and we're going to be working with HUD and with their local partners to put pantries into these facilities to bring it where they are. And in addition to the pantries, in addition to the training and demonstration kitchens, we're going to provide the ingredients for those meals so that people can learn to cook them, and also have a farmer's market so they can buy fresh produce. So we're bringing it right to them. And what also is really cool about it, in addition to the health effects of that and the benefits, it'll be an opportunity for people to further their education, perhaps in culinary arts or other areas, and also in business and employment as well. We'll bring restaurants in, we'll bring a number of different people. We'll be working with local chefs, farmers markets, and food banks.
Wow.
That's awesome. Are you doing anything with food trucks or anything along those lines within this whole concept?
Not initially, no, we're not. No, but you know, as it develops, I'm sure we'll start to look at that.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Alderman Munoz.
Yes.
2 minutes or less. What should our friends know about you, brother?
Folks should know about me the fact that I like to build stuff.
All right.
Yes, because in 1978, when I was in 8th grade, Robert Burns Elementary School, my 8th grade math class was in a hallway.
Okay.
Because the school was overcrowded. Fast forward to 1993, when I became the alderman of the 22nd Ward, I went back to Robert Burns Elementary, and that 8th grade math class was still in a hallway.
Wow.
So we made it our mission, I made it my mission as alderman of the 22nd Ward in Little Village in North Lawndale, to focus in on the Chicago Board of Ed's capital budget to build new schools.
Okay.
Between 1993 and 97, we built five new grammar schools. Yes, you can applaud. 5 new grammar schools, all within 2 miles to relieve the overcrowding with Finkel, Zapata, Josef Ortiz de Dominguez, Little Village Academy, and Madero School, all within 2 miles. In 1998, we finished building those grammar schools.
Okay.
We set our sights on a high school. So in 2003, we opened a brand new $72 million high school at 31st and Costner. So when folks come to see me in my office and say, hey, Rick, what are you most proud of in your work as an alderman? Because I've been, as I mentioned earlier, alderman since 1993. First and foremost, I say I'm proud of my kids, because both my kids are now gainfully employed and are off the payroll, with my wife and I having sent them off to college, and now that they're working. But professionally, I'm most proud of the fact that we were able to build those 5 grammar schools and 1 high school, all within 2 miles, to relieve the overcrowding so that young men and women can be educated in the environment that they can enjoy.
Sure.
Not a closet.
Sure.
Not a hallway.
Okay.
Not having to move between mobile units. Yes, you can applaud.
Yes. Don't you love?
And so I love my job as an alderman because we get to build stuff. And that's with public money.
Right.
So that's the $460 million of investment between 1993 and 2003 to build those public schools. But we've also, for example, helped build the YMCA right here on 27th and Western with private money, the El Valor Daycare Center over at 24th and Colin with private money, and the new police station at Ogden and Homan, and 2 new fire stations and 1 new library, all within 2 miles of each other because the neighborhood was woefully in need of those kinds of services. So if you ask the question, what do you want folks to know about you? I like to build stuff.
If they build it, they will come.
They'll be there.
All right. One of the cool questions we've been able to ask the majority of our guests here today is, what makes your heart beat fast? Now, we know that you're very passionate about the area that your vocation is, so forth, but at the end of the day, what makes your heart beat fast? I see you smiling there, Alderman, but I'm going to start with you, Jeff. What makes your heart beat fast?
Well, I know it's a corny answer, but it really is the work I'm doing now with this 501c3 with Real Food Pantry. I've had some successes professionally and personally over the years, but there's really nothing like what you can see happening here with what we're doing with Real Food Pantry. Just talking to the people in the community, and I'll use the word community from earlier before, but just being able to talk to people and realize that there is a need and how we can fill the need, and it can be done, working collaboratively, not just with people in the community, but with other organizations, other corporations, foundations, not-for-profits, all trying to do the same thing. One of the things I've noticed, and this is what really, again, gets me going, is I've talked to a number of the food and hunger groups around the country, and everybody wants to work together for the same goal. So we're filling a void that hasn't been filled yet, so they welcome the help that we're providing and the venue that we have for them, so that we can collaborate and work together with our resources so we don't have to duplicate efforts, and to do as much as we can to help the people and the residents of the housing units.
That's awesome. My heart is beating fast just listening.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That sounds good. Okay, Jonathan, what about you, my friend? What makes your heart beat fast?
I mean, to start with some pretty useless stuff, I'm a big Buffalo Bills fan, so.
Okay, you're free to leave.
Yeah, probably not any Bills fans in here. I like playing football. That makes my heart beat fast.
Jonathan, you need to be careful because we have Mamba Boy Otis Wilson in the house here today. Chicago Bear, great. So be careful.
I don't know if I have to be careful because Jimmy's father played for the Bills, so that's part of the reason I'm here. Okay. But
there you go.
So I'm trying to get an autograph maybe later. Other things, I think leadership like we have here earlier today, sitting with us right now, effective leadership, and that passion that I see from these different people gets my heart beating fast. I think for myself personally, just helping people help others. I think that like if I just threw myself into social services, I could maybe make an impact on 15 people. But you know, when you're able to use technology, it's scalable.
Sure.
And we're talking about 2 million people experiencing homelessness in the US this year, and 148 million more people who actually just walk right by them with a smartphone in their pocket. I think that's exciting. And you know, to be able to do that work and even see like the Lord open doors and just do things that I wouldn't have been able to do myself. You can call it luck, you can call it God, whatever. I think that's really exciting too.
Awesome, awesome. Alderman Munoz, what makes your heart beat fast, really fast?
Well, I kind of chuckled and smiled when you first asked the question, but on a serious note, having grown up here on the southwest side of the city of Chicago, blue lights in the rearview mirror. And I say that because the relationship between my neighborhood, a neighborhood of color, and the police leaves a lot to be desired. And the work that we're doing to break down the barriers between community and law enforcement is necessary because we don't want that 13, 14, 15-year-old's first experience in talking to Blue to be a negative one.
Sure.
And I kind of chuckled because, yeah, it's kind of funny now that I'm a 52-year-old alderman to be scared of a blue light in the rearview mirror, but that's the reality that our young men and women in Little Village in the 22nd Ward face every day.
Exactly.
And the flip side is the work we're doing with the YMCA, the work we're doing with a group called Enlace Chicago, where we take young men and women and put them in programs that engage in a positive relationship building project with law enforcement. One of the things we do every summer is we have this softball league where, you know, the 15 to 21-year-olds come out and play, you know, kids that are at the edge, that are in need, and then during the playoffs, they get to play a team of police officers.
Okay. Wow.
And so that their first experience with someone who's in law enforcement is a negative one.
Yeah.
And that kind of work gets me excited.
That's awesome. How many of you folks here in the room here today remember Officer Friendly? I mean, I may be dating myself right now, but that's okay. But just the relationship and the rapport with law enforcement in the community, Officer Friendly would show up at your school and you just felt safe. And there was someone you can turn to with a huge smile on their face. And it made a big difference. And it built that rapport and respect, you know, in the neighborhood. So appreciate what you're saying.
Doesn't always exist right now.
Exactly.
We have to work towards it.
Exactly, exactly. Alderman Clark, what makes your heart beat fast on the south side of Chicago?
Well, my heart beats fast because I have competent leaders in the community. When I have competent leadership in the community that runs organizations, that makes it easier for the implementation and the outcomes. My heart beats fast because I like to create collaborations and build capacity where capacity is not at. When I can achieve that, then I am very excited about that. If I can put the bricks and mortar up, which I love to do, just like Rick, we've done a lot of building. We are expanding tremendously. If I can put an elementary school on a new track to an AB, change it from a regular school to an AB school, and start at kindergarten, and I see my first 8th grader grow and graduate, having gone through a 9-year program that we've implemented in education, I get excited about that. When I can build a new charter school, when I can help someone put a specialized school in place that can support children who have had turns in their life that need another opportunity.
Okay.
All of these outcomes put workforce development programs where we focus on putting people back to work, sending them through journeys where when they walk through the door of an employer, that employer has a good employee. Achievement, achievement, achievement. That is what I like to do. I like to achieve at every level in life.
And that's making your heart beat really fast.
That's making me heart beat.
Feel it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Scott.
Well, usually it's getting out in the neighborhood and fixing stuff with friends or community, whether it's a park or working at a school to, you know, get something done real quick. Usually I'm not dressed like this. Before I came, I was in jeans and Friday gear trying to get out and do stuff. But, you know, I think beyond that, in Chicago, in the city council, we're kind of, you know, everybody knows us as the rubber stamp council. And that's unfortunate, but I think some of us have tried to rise up and challenge the system as it is over the last few years. So for me, my heart really starts beating fast when, you know, we're looking at maybe $1 billion bond deal or some kind of package out there, and I'm reading through it and I see something and I think, hey, we could save $20 or $50 million on this, and I raise my hand.
Okay.
And the mayor, whether it was Daley or Brahm, is like, oh, Jesus, like, what does this guy want? It does make my heart beat, but I think when we know we're right on a lot of these issues, we have to challenge that. We have to challenge both the accountability on those deals, the transparency. That's not a big thing here in Chicago. So it's a little thing, but it does make my heart beat really fast when I find those things and know that we can take those dollars, or we could take them, and reinvest them in the things that we're talking about here, which is food for children or homelessness and the mental health clinics that we need back in this city. Because we've lost a lot of those things. We've lost a lot of direction in this city. And so it's not just about the dollars, it's about just bringing people back and focusing on that.
Great. great. Show them some love, friends. You guys have all of our hearts beating fast after that, for sure. Now, I want to ask you guys a question here. And I want you to think way outside of the box on this one, okay? If you can wave a magic wand and you had one shot to correct a major crisis in distressed communities today, what would that shot look like? And you got one shot, you waving a magic wand, what would it be? No particular order here, just fire up. You got one shot, what would it be? Scott, you look like you're ready.
Rick touched on it. I think it would be rebuilding or building the relationship between the Black and Latino communities in our city with the police department. It has to be that, because if we don't have that trust, if we don't have that community, all the things that we're trying to do in the next few weeks with police reforms falls way too short.
Okay.
A couple of, maybe 7, 8 years ago, there was a foundation here in the city of Chicago that had this campaign where they showed a picture of a 4-year-old Asian child, a 4-year-old African-American child, a 4-year-old Latino child, all hugging each other with the banner, "No one is born a racist," because we learn racism. Because at that age, the only people that those 4-year-olds hate is the nurse. Whether she be white, black, brown, or Filipino.
Yeah.
And if we can eradicate inequality and racism, that is something that we need to deal with as a whole. And I'm dating myself here. I already said I was 52 years old, but I'll say it again. Our generation is still stuck in the 70s in terms of people being able to deal with each other and just share common experiences. And the millennials, on the other hand, are way ahead of us in terms of their race relations, in terms of their, but you've got a country that is trying to hold them back.
Sure.
Based on generational issues, based on lack of information.
Right.
Lack of, I'm not racist. I have a Mexican friend.
Right.
Not.
Yeah.
That's doesn't mean you're not racist.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
And if we can eradicate inequality and racism by just waving a wand, that would set us forward.
Okay, so we got police reform, we got eradicating racism. Okay, Jonathan, what about you?
Yeah, obviously I've spoken a lot about homelessness, but I think looking upstream a little bit, if I was to wave a magic wand, I see a lot of the root causes to people ending up on the street as a result of, not just addiction, not just financial tragedy, but really relational poverty. And, the breakdown of a critical relationship. Someone's abused, someone passes away, someone's kicked out. And so, if I was to look upstream a little bit and I could wave my wand, it would just be like the restoration of family units, probably.
Yeah.
It's like 2 parents.
All right. Great.
The right nutrition would be a second one, yeah.
Okay. Great. We're getting close to the wire here.
Well, if I could wave a wand, I would go back 400 years. I would go back 400 years and change the relationship of mankind in America and put value on everyone's life and understand how important we are to one another and institute education as a primary instrument and family development and cohesiveness as a way to make our America truly a great place, greater than what it is. If we did that, we wouldn't have the disparities of economics. We wouldn't have the disparities of housing. We wouldn't have the disparities of prejudice. We would not have the disparities of social justice that is so prevalent today. I can speak when you talk about police relationships with community. I spent 26 years on the Chicago Police Department. That experience prepared me for the job that I'm doing today. I saw life from a perspective that allowed me to understand the most lowest and the most highest. Today, I have one side of my community as the Nobel Peace Prize winners, the other side is an immigrant community, and everything in between. That balance that we have to have shouldn't be there. And if we had gone back 400 years and we waved that wand, everybody would be moving and supporting and living in an equal and quality environment. If not, the most of us, as opposed to, let me reword that. Most of us would be living like that. There would be some people who are rich, but others of us who want to live a moderate lifestyle and a comfortable lifestyle and be educated and see our children succeed and our neighborhoods succeed, we would be much better off.
Okay, we're about to wrap up here. I'm going to, one minute to give me your response, if you could wave that one, because we're going to go on a break.
Hope. And not only to instill hope in everybody, but the pathway to reach fulfillment. And I think if everyone who's spoken today was able to achieve their mission, I think we'd be real close to that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Why don't you show our panel some love? You know, I think if we all can just, you know, pause for a moment and think about if we all had a magic wand, if we had one shot, what would we do? And I think we would all see our world and our communities differently if we can achieve that one shot. God bless all of you. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'm going to turn it over to Jimmy.
Thank you, Alvin. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Hey, Alderman Jimmy Kemp, good to meet you. Thank you, Jimmy. Thanks, Jeff. So we're going to go into a break now. Thank you all. Thanks, brother. We're going to go into a break now, but this is your last opportunity to get through the booths. We have a special treat. We've got a guy from right here in the neighborhood, Chef Danny Espinosa, who's got a restaurant called Taco Madre. Tacos have a special place in my heart because just like you and your family, our family's bonds were built around the dinner table, and my mom, being a Californian, she made and makes the best tacos around. She taught my wife how to do tacos the right way. And I'm sure that Taco Madres are probably a little bit better than ours. But Mom, you've got the best tacos going. And I'd like you to welcome Danny Espinosa, who is going to tell you about the snacks that he made for you. And you're going to get one more run through the booths. And then we have Governor Rauner, and we'll close out the day. So thank you very much. Enjoy the snacks. And please welcome Danny Espinosa. Danny. Thank you, Chef.
How's everybody? So I want to invite you first and foremost to make sure you try the tamales we're going to be serving. My name is Daniel Espinosa. I am born and raised in Humboldt Park, Chicago. Thank you. I really appreciate that because throughout my whole life, I haven't felt the love for Humboldt Park. But anyways, yeah, I'm just, you know, Mexican roots. My parents made sure we never forgot where we came from. At the same time, I started cooking because of my vacations in Mexico. So like I mentioned about the tamal we're serving a corunda. So it's not your typical tamal that you would see that's red filled with meat. Come try it out. It is vegan for all you vegans, gluten-free for everyone who's gluten-free. I got you guys all covered. There's also ceviche, just refreshing, finish it off. But yeah, I just wanted to thank the Jack Kemp Foundation because it literally means a lot to get in front of just everyone who's trying to come together as a whole and just make Chicago and everything greater. And it gives people hope, and that's what I try to give to my community, hope, because I once walked down, I still walk down Humboldt Park, but at the same time, I would have never imagined traveling the world, and it was all due to food. So I really, really hope to inspire and continue inspiring the communities, because if I did it, anyone can do it. Thank you.